Good morning, everyone. Today's journal presentation topic is clinical course and risk factors for mortality of adult and patients with COVID 19 in Wuhan, China. It's a retrospective cohort study taken from Lancet, which was published on 9th of March in 2020. I'm your presenter, Dr. Siddharth Pandey, and the moderator for the session is Dr. ML Bhatt. Moving on to a brief introduction. As we all know, in December 2019, Wuhan city, the capital of Hubei province in China, became the center of an outbreak of pneumonia of unknown cause. By January 2, by January 7, 2020, Chinese scientists had isolated a novel coronavirus, severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, or SARS-CoV-2, previously also known as 2019 nCoV. N stands for novel, from these patients with virus-infected pneumonia. It was later designated as COVID-19 in February 2020 by WHO and later declared a pandemic on 11th of March 2020. Coming to the outbreak itself was likely to have occurred from a large seafood and live wild market at the center of Wuhan city. The initial transmission of the infection was zoonotic, and later human to human transmission was also established. The initial spectrum of presentation of COVID-19 included asymptomatic infection, mild upper respiratory tract illness, severe viral pneumonia with respiratory failure, and in certain cases, even death. The study was one of the first to be conducted, and to the best of the knowledge of the researchers, no prior studies were published with definite outcomes. Although some case series were published, but the estimation of risk factors for severe disease and death in these earlier case series are therefore not very robust. Additionally, the details of the clinical and virological course of the illness were not very well described, especially at the time when the study was conducted. We'll be discussing the methods in detail. The study design itself was a retrospective cohort study. Two cohorts of adult inpatients more than 18 years of age from Jinyantan Hospital and Wuhan Pulmonary Hospital were taken for the study. All the adult patients who were diagnosed with COVID-19, according to WHO interim guidance, were screened, and those who died or were discharged between 29th of December 2019 to 31st of January 2020 were included in the study. The data collection, that is the epidemiological, demographic, clinical, laboratory, treatment, and outcome data, were extracted from electronic media records using a standardized collection form. All the data were later checked and studied on by two physicians and a third researcher. Laboratory procedures included SARS-CoV-2 detection in respiratory specimens, which was done by next-generation sequencing or RT-PCR methods. Throat swab specimens were obtained for COVID PCR re-examination every other day after clinical remission of symptoms including fever, cough, and dyspnea, but only qualitative data were available. The routine blood examinations done in these two hospitals included complete blood count, coagulation profile, serum biochemical tests which included liver function test, renal function test, creatinine kinase, lactate dehydrogenase, and serum electrolytes, along with myocardial enzymes, interleukin 6, serum ferritin, procalcitonin. The criteria for discharge of patients was the absence of fever for at least 3 days, substantial improvement in chest CT or chest X-rays, clinical remission of respiratory symptoms, and two throat swabs which were negative for COVID RNA obtained at least 24 hours apart. The definitions of the various things that were used in the study and the protocol itself. Standard guidelines were used for defining various outcomes of the infection, for example, fever, acute kidney injury, ARDS, etc. The illness of the illness severity of COVID-19 was defined according to the Chinese management guideline for COVID-19, and the exposure history for the patients was defined as exposure to people with confirmed SARS-CoV-2 infection or exposure to the Wuhan seafood market. The statistical analysis, continuous and categorical variables were presented as median and n or percentage respectively. Mann-Whitney U test, chi-square test, Fisher's exact test were used to compare differences between survivors and non-survivors wherever appropriate. 5 variables were chosen for multivariable analysis on the basis of previous findings and clinical constraints. Some blood investigations such as troponin I, creatinine kinase, D-dimer, serum ferritin, and interleukin 6 were unavailable in certain emergency circumstances. Therefore, the 5 variables for our multivariable logistic regression model were chosen to be lymphocyte count, D-dimer, SOFA score, coronary heart disease, and finally age. Coming to the results of the study, a total of 191 patients were included in the study. 54 of the patients died and 137 of them were discharged. The median age of 191 patients was 56 years, ranging from 18 years to 17 years of age, and most of the patients were males. Comorbidities were present in nearly half of the patients, with hypertension being the most common comorbidity, followed by diabetes and coronary heart disease. Most common symptom on admission were fever and cough, followed by sputum production or expectoration and fatigue. There are certain important milestones that we'd like to discuss. The median time for illness from illness to discharge was 22 days. Here we are considering illness as the first symptom that had occurred. And median time from illness to death was 18 and a half days. Median time from illness to need for mechanical ventilation was 14 and a half days. 32 patients needed invasive mechanical ventilation, 31 of whom had died. So almost 97% of patients who needed invasive mechanical ventilation died, and all the 31 patients who got invasive mechanical ventilation later developed ventilator associated pneumonias. Extracorporeal membrane oxygenation was used in 3 patients, none of whom survived. Here we can take a look at the various milestones in the history of the survivors and the non-survivors. Coming to the survivors, as we can see, the first symptom in survivors and the non-survivors both is fever and cough. The sepsis happens to be the earliest and the most common complication both in survivors and non-survivors. However, sepsis and ARDS were the only 2 complications seen in survivors. The non-survivors later developed acute cardiac injury, acute kidney injury, secondary infections, and death. The median death was considered at 18 and a half days or on the 19th day, and the median day of discharge was 22nd, and the discharge was done only after 2 consecutive samples which tested negative for COVID-19. Hence, after the first sample, after the last sample of COVID-19 being positive, there is always a gap of 2 days before the patient was discharged. Secondly, lymphocytopenia occurred in 40% of the patients, that is 77 in total, and 181 patients received antibiotics, while 41 received antiviral therapy with lopinavir and ritonavir. Systematic corticosteroid and IVIG use differed significantly between non-survivors and survivors. Sepsis was again the most frequent complication, followed by respiratory failure, ARDS, heart failure, and septic shock. We'll just discuss briefly about the cardiac complications. The cardiac complications included new or worsening heart failure, new or worsening arrhythmia, or myocardial infarction. It was common, as such, all these cardiac complications are common in patients who are suffering from pneumonia. And in patients with known patients with Known patients with coronary artery disease, acute cardiac events, and poor outcomes in patients with influenza and other respiratory viral infections are also seen. In one of the cases, the first autopsy of a 53-year-old woman with chronic renal failure also showed acute myocardial infarction. 90% of the patients with pneumonia had an increased coagulation activity, which was demonstrated by increased D-dimer concentrations. Also in the study, it was found that D-dimer concentration greater than 1 microgram per ml had a fatal outcome for COVID-19 positive patients. The contributory mechanisms for cardiac complications could be systemic pro-inflammatory cytokine response. The cytokine response mediates atherosclerosis directly, contributing to plaque rupture through local inflammation, induction of procoagulant factors, and hemodynamic changes, which in turn predispose to ischemia and thrombosis. Angiotensin converting enzyme 2, which is the receptor for COVID-19, is expressed on myocytes and vascular endothelial cells. So there is at least theoretical potential possibility of direct cardiac involvement by the virus. Also, interestingly, in the autopsy samples, the interstitial mononuclear infiltrate was present. Inflammatory infiltrates were present in heart tissue, but the presence of the virus itself was not found. We'll be discussing in short the temporal changes in lab markers from illness onset in patients with in patients hospitalized with COVID-19. First of all, we'll be discussing D-dimer. As we had discussed, the patients, the red ones, the red graph is for the non-survivors. Those are the patients who died of COVID-19. And the blue graph is for survivors, the patients who were discharged. So as we can see, the D-dimer concentration, it is extremely low in patients who were survivors, and it shows a higher trend in patients with COVID-19. So the maximum value reaching up to 1 microgram per ml for all the survivors. That is the median value on 19th day. Coming to the lymphocyte count, in general, the lymphocyte count was higher in patients who survived the COVID-19 infection. Thirdly, we'll discuss the interleukin 9. Interleukin 9 values were exponentially high in patients with COVID-19 infection, more so towards the later stage, mostly after 2 weeks of infection. The serum ferritin levels, although higher in the non-survivors, show a similar increasing trend and a plateau in between for the survivors. Now coming to high sensitivity cardiac troponin I values. They're in the normal range for all the survivors, as the patients who survived COVID-19 did not suffer any cardiac complications. And the ones who had suffered cardiac complications and succumbed to it usually showed a very high value just prior to the morbidity. Coming to lactate dehydrogenase levels, the, the the normal trend was an increase in LDH values up to 10 to 30th day, following which there was a decline in value for the survivors and an elevation in the value of LDH for non-survivors. Now, inadvertently, the researchers had their hands on data which was available to them. That is the COVID-19 results, the RNA positivity. So it was seen that coronavirus RNA detection is more sensitive than the virus isolation itself, and most studies have used qualitative or quantitative viral RNA tests, such as a potential marker for infectious COVID-19. Viral RNA was detected in respiratory specimens from about a third of the patients as long as 4 weeks after the disease onset. This study showed that detectable COVID RNA persisted for a median of 20 days in survivors, and it was present until death in patients who were non-survivors. The effective antiviral treatment might improve outcomes in COVID-19, although we did not observe shortening of viral shedding duration even after lopinavir or ritonavir treatment in the current study. So currently, randomized controlled trials for efficacy of oral lopinavir and ritonavir and IV remdesivir in treatment for COVID-19 are currently underway. Coming to certain drawbacks of the study, due to a retrospective design, not all laboratory tests were done in all the patients. Patients were sometimes transferred late in their illness to the two included hospitals, and the lack of effective antivirals, inadequate adherence to standard supportive therapy, and high dose corticosteroid therapy might also have contributed to poor outcomes. Thirdly, the estimated duration of viral shedding is limited by the frequency of by the respiratory of by the frequency of by the frequency of respiratory specimen collection, the lack of quantitative viral RNA detection, and a relatively low positive rate of COVID RNA detection in throat swabs. The interpretation of the findings might be limited by the small sample size itself. Coming to the implications of the disease or the takeaway points, the older age, elevated D-dimer levels and high SOFA score could help clinicians identify at an early stage those patients with COVID-19 who have a poor prognosis. Also, prolonged viral shedding provides the rationale for a strategy of isolation of infected patients and optimal antiviral interventions in the future. Thank you.